this way only. 60,000-70,000 rupees for a new one. Okay, so I want to speak briefly, not too elaborately, on the role of food and fasting in yoga. When we are doing a spiritual practice, we should be very mindful, very aware of what we are eating. Now, I've already spoken about ahara. Ahara is everything that we consume, not just the physical food, but even what we read, what we hear, who we interact with. Every interaction, in a sense, is an energy input. Everything that we allow into our mind or our emotion is an input, and it is a form of either nourishment or depletion. I want to speak specifically about the physical act of eating and why fasting is encouraged in so many spiritual practices, whether it is Sufis or the Christian monks or the yogis or the Jains who take fasting to the ultimate logical conclusion with Sarlekhana, when they finally starve themselves to death as compensation for the karmic sin of eating. Because every time we eat, we kill a living thing. So you cannot live without killing. Plants have less mind than animals. So it is preferable, more from a health reason than anything else, to have a predominantly vegetarian diet than a non-vegetarian diet. It's not because of it makes you rajasic and it fills you with negativity, but all food fills you with negativity. Because food, as understood in Prana Shakti terms, is a very dense, very non-nourishing, it's rather like the cornflakes of prana, that cornflakes is a very empty, it's a very corn essentially has very little nutritive value, and cornflakes much worse also. Though everybody begins their day thinking they are pumping health into themselves with that, but it's basically empty. It's empty, and from a pranic point of view, that chemically processed, advertisingly packaged stuff that comes, oh dear, okay, let's not get into that. But all of food nowadays comes like that. You have apples that don't rot for 3-4 months now. Huh? They are waxed. If you're eating food that doesn't rot, it's not a good idea. Because that is now dead and embalmed. But the point is, food is a sort of manner in which to get nourishment. The human being and plants are, human beings and animals are plants which have achieved mobility. The plants gain their nourishment from the roots. We have packed up our roots and put them into our stomach, which is why if you look at the intestines, they actually look rather like roots. They look like, and we absorb the nourishment from the intestines. We take the food, we chew it, we send it there and all those. But basically, in the end, we have to do the same thing the plant does. You got to absorb it. You got to pass it through those little tubes or those channels, and it has to be absorbed into the body. So in that sense, we are not really that different from plants. We are mobile plants. But the truth is, all life is dependent on photosynthesis. All life is dependent on light. The plants process the sunlight, and then we either eat the plants or we eat the animals that eat the plants. So in the end, all life is dependent on light. Many yogic schools and many mystics have, by accident very often, not consciously, they have discovered that there is another kind of nourishment, and that you can draw that nourishment. The prana you can actually draw from the sunlight or even the environment or other living things. You don't necessarily need to depend on food per se. Now there's a whole light eaters and breatharian movement where people try to do completely without food, and they, not all of them are fakes and frauds and deluded. Some of them actually achieve pretty spectacular results with it. In yoga, there are very well specified parameters. There is even something called the Garuda Sadhana, where you basically, it's a process of about working with the solar energy for 30 days, and at the end of it, your intake of food is absolutely minimum. There is a famous yogi somewhere who's apparently over 100, and he hasn't eaten in about 80 years. They're on TV, he wears a nut and sari and everything, even though he's got full beard and everything, and he nourishes himself from the what is called the amrita. There is a sort of fluid that keeps falling from the head or the brain or whatever. It's actually not from the physical brain, it's a sort of pranic thing, and it usually, in most human beings, it falls directly into the stomach, and the jataragni, the digestive fire of the stomach, destroys that. Whereas certain kinds of yogis and certain kinds of parampara, they manage to prevent that dripping of the amrita from falling into the stomach and the jataragni destroying it. So they either physically they curl their tongue back and catch it, or they have other ways of preventing it from going in. The physical ways are pretty crude. They take rock salt and they cut your tongue. That, you know, your tongue is attached to your palate over here. This part, they keep cutting that. They keep cutting it bit by bit with rock salt until your tongue can totally curl back. And then you're supposed to catch that. But that is all esoteric stuff, and in the end it's futile, because you're trying to extend your life or extend your health in a sort of artificial, all right, so you get an exceptionally long life, but the point is to become enlightened and liberated and get the body of light, not to, it's a interesting process, but it's not really important for those who are in serious integral yoga. It's an interesting process, and it's a process that is done. The Nadpanthis are very famous for doing it. Many schools of yoga are famous for doing it. Paramahansa Yogananda, in his book, has written about that Giribala Ma and Therese Newman, both of whom used to live without food. Autobiography of the yogi has written that. Both of them used to live without food. It's well known. Some people actually become like plants. Now, without going to that extent, because you see the practice needed to attain complete freedom from food takes about 3-4 hours a day, if it is a technical thing that is happening and not something that is spontaneously happening. So it's difficult for most people to do that, and I think some organization, Nityananda's organization or somebody is teaching people how to do it, actually teaching people how to live without food. But in most yogas, what they do is that they try to make you less dependent on getting Prana Shakti from Ahara. They try to make you less dependent on getting the Prana Shakti, because you see, the food is from a lower level of consciousness. The plant is a lower level of consciousness than the animal. This is one thing that all the vegetarians never think of when they launch into their holier than thou self-righteous arguments about, the plant is actually barely above minerals, and it's a lower level of mind and a lower level of consciousness than the animal. So that, I don't want to call it taint or contamination, but that lack is certainly there. Now, of course, the solution to that is not to start becoming cannibals. Let's eat the highest level. But in a sense, that lack of intense vibration, that lack of quality vibration that is found in most foods, which is why yogis end up preferring very specific kinds of foods. They discover certain rare kinds of herbs. They discover certain rare kinds of berries which give like tremendous bang for buck, tremendous return on investment, and they love that, because if you consume a lot of, you pile up the plate with rice and then you pour ton of curries and ton of vegetable, and you'll be very lucky if you're getting 5% actual energy nourishment from that. The rest is 95%, for want of a better word, dead or inert energy. And you have to process it. You have to process that inert energy, and as a yogi, when you're doing your, especially if you're doing something like the breaths, you become so aware of the vibrational quality of food. Even if you have a little bit sensitivity, you become aware of vibration quality of food. That if you take sprouts, for instance, you find it difficult to eat it because sprouts are still living. And you put it into your mouth and you're grinding it, and you have become like a rakshasa. You can feel the life in your mouth struggling to survive. And we are all recommended, eat living things. And I'm like, yeah, eat living things. If you know how much the living thing suffers because, you are chomping away to glory. So that is why yogis try to become disciplined and controlled about their food, because they want to limit that issue of taking life as much as possible, and they want to limit that issue of let us not take things from a lower vibration, because then if it is from a lower level of intensity, a lower level of pranic nourishment, a lower level of ki or chi, then our body has to deal with that burden. We are taking on an additional burden. Our body itself, because of the kind of food and the kind of appalling nutritional behaviors of India, especially, like, you know, the Indian is the most malnourished and the most easily overtrained. If you put an Indian into any kind of weightlifting regimen, the easiest thing is that the body gets into permanent higher metabolic setting, and the muscles literally start consuming themselves. And those who do hard physical labor, you see many of them, they end up exceedingly lean and thin. They don't bulk up in muscle because the nutrition is wrong and the body is now consuming itself. It's a very typically Indian problem, and we have the nutritional illiteracy of the average Indian is astonishing. Those who are living extremely traditional lives in small towns and they are eating according to the seasons and all that, they have a little bit of leeway, and they have a little bit of, because out there the natural rhythm is not completely interrupted. But today, on top of all these things, we have all pizza and we have all the dead food of the world. And if you look at all this processed food full of preservatives and fertilizer, not only it has no energy, no Prana Shakti to nourish you, it has a lot of it has a lot of so that is catastrophic. So they recommend fasting not just for the self-discipline aspect of fasting, which of course is a very good thing. That just because you are hungry, are you therefore helpless? Are you therefore driven to stuff your face like a pig? Pigs are very dangerous animals, especially in feeding time. If you get in their way, they can rip your arm off. A fully grown pig is a very dangerous animal. Are you going to function from that level of consciousness, or are you going to function as a manava? Are you going to function as a human being? Can you restrain your survival instincts? Can you rise above your purely survival instincts? That is, of course, a large part of the discipline of fasting. So to that extent, of course, if you're a sannyasi and you're wandering and you don't get food, are you going to lose your temper and abuse everybody because of that? There's a very famous story of a Sufi master. He used to always, every day he would begin and every day he would end by telling God, I am so grateful for all that you have given me. And a time came when he was wandering with his disciples, and 3 days in a row they didn't get any food. And this guy is still saying, first thing in the morning, last thing, Junaid or one of those mystics, he's saying, I am so grateful for everything that you have given me. I am so grateful that you have kept me alive. And finally, one of his disciples couldn't take it anymore, and they asked him, "What is this nonsense? 3 days we've been wandering around and nobody." And he said, "See, 3 days we have not got food, and I have not altered in any way. My gratitude to God for having brought me into existence is the same. My reaction to situations are the same. It is not dependent on the state of my stomach. So I am even more grateful now to Him that He has placed me in a state of consciousness where food being there or not being there is not going to change my essence. So that of course is a very advanced kind of thing. It is well known that yogis have supernatural control over the body, and then somebody gives them some tasty food and that's it, blessings flow. Because yogis tended to be hungry people, especially if you're a parivrajaka, a wandering yogi, you never knew when you were going to get food next. But there is a deeper reason in the actual practice of yoga, since especially for those in Kundalini yoga, those in the integral yoga, people like us, people doing the 8 spiritual breaths, people doing the Arya Yoga, there is a deeper reason why occasional intermittent fasting is very important. Because when you're doing your practice, anyways your Prana Shakti is up, your receptivity to the Prana Shakti from the outside is up. In our practice, we have specific visualizations and specific instructions how to draw the Prana Shakti from the environment, how to connect to every living thing, how to draw the Prana Shakti from every living thing. But we don't get to see it most of the time because food, 3 times a day, food, and then why do people feel sleepy and inert soon after having a heavy meal? Because the consciousness in the food, the vibration of the food is so low level, it actually brings everything crashing down. It brings the mind crashing down, and then this habit of late night dinner that India, God knows where it has developed from. A more tamasic thing you cannot imagine. We are the people who used to actually have signs that Hindu hotel, which means that the cook used to be Brahman, so everything is sattvic food. It is prepared in a particular way. And today this whole thing of late night dinners and everything, where the plates start coming out at 10:30 at night. It's like why don't you just chug acid or something straight away and be done with it? Why are you doing this to your body? Why are you committing this atrocity on your body? But when you fast, either consciously or inadvertently, now this is not true for everybody, though of course it does have an effect on everybody, but people who are in a pranic path, people who are in a kriya path, people who are in a shakti path, when they fast, and if they are a little bit, even moderately experienced in that, when they fast and the food is not there and the body is not engaged with the issue of processing food, it immediately activates into drawing in the life energy, the Prana Shakti from the environment. You can actually feel your body shake itself loose, and then it's okay, now we need little energy. Where can we get it from? And it starts drawing it in. Now, if you are in the habit of eating 3-4 times a day, if you are in the habit of never ever fasting, your body will never come into that practice. Your body will never come into that practice of drawing the energy from the environment, not unless you are very lucky. That shutting down the food processing aspect of your body is very important, so that your body can train itself to draw nourishment from the environment, to draw prana, to draw ki or chi from the environment. And that is why intermittent fasting is very good, because if you fast the same time every day or the same time every week, on Monday I will fast, then your body compensates. From Friday you start overloading yourself with food. And Sunday you have really heavy meals, lunch and dinner, so that on Monday only late evening you feel hungry. That doesn't help. In fact, you actually overload your system with that kind of attitude. So random intermittent, there should not be any pattern. It should not be exactly after every 2 days or every 3 days. Randomly, if you can fast, then the body does not have time to fall into the pattern. And how did we do it in our culture? You see, our culture was extremely spiritually sophisticated. The extent, the magnitude of that sophistication has been forgotten today, and all that remains are superstitions and foolishness. We are supposed to fast on Ekadashi because Ekadashi is the time of the month when really, if you are prepared and you are a slightly yogic person, you can start drawing in the energy from the environment. Those 3 days of the month, you really don't require food that much. Ekadashi is always 11th day after the full moon or the new moon. Since it is a lunar calendar, it will always be different. It won't come precisely at the same time during the month. So, once or twice a month, there will always be the time when you just don't eat food. And it keeps varying. So, there you have your random fluctuation, you have your variability. It's not predictable. Your body cannot train itself to compensate and develop fat. These simple things, instead of I don't know what was the reason, either because people got tired of explaining to every new generation of thick, dull people that this is the reason why, and they just said, it's a rule, follow it. But this is the reason. The Ekadashi fast is actually a perfect randomization process. It's a perfect randomization process of the whole thing of fasting, and it's a natural flow of existence. As the energy flows in the world, there are certain days when you need more food, because certain expenditure will be more, or the planetary situation is such. There are certain days when you won't need. The environment is actually carrying you and supporting you. Ekadashi is one of those days. Now, the thing is, you cannot do all this in isolation. The reasons, all these structures, that all these religious and spiritual practices were structured within a context. They were structured, they were set within an extremely sophisticated, extremely advanced, and extremely complex social environment. The social environment has gone, and all we have is fast on Ekadashi. But what is the point of fasting if you're not in yoga? What is the point of fasting if you don't have the experience of the Prana Shakti rising in you? If you have that and then you fast on Ekadashi, then you understand. What is the point of saying it is full moon, please don't blabber? Keep maunam, keep silence, at least on full moon, on Purnima. On Purnima we are supposed to be silent, because there is a certain expenditure. Always speaking is great drain on energy. There is enormous drain, and anyways the full moon is when lunacy happens, no? So it's better that you don't open your mouth at that time. There are so many wonderful sort of insights that were all then inserted as practices. Things which were just natural to do. It was an extraordinary civilization and culture, because the whole culture was geared to make a person optimal and to liberate the person. The whole culture, every single thing you do was in service of yoga. Every single thing you did was to liberate the person. So, whether you can follow Ekadashi or not, even randomly fasting, even if you can't fast once a week, try at least once a fortnight. Even if you cannot, every full moon you cannot be silent because you have life circumstance, sometimes at least be silent. No, the world can survive for a while without your words of wisdom, or the dulcet tones of your beautiful voice. Like, we shall bear the deprivation with lot of sorrow, but at least the point I'm making is, you must get there, you must understand, and without that discipline of fasting and without that experience of how when the body is not waiting for food to provide fuel, it automatically starts drawing in the necessary life energy from the environment, that is fascinating. That is an extremely powerful thing in yoga, because when you understand that, all right, there is another way to nourish oneself. Ahara, you begin to understand the whole concept of ahara, you begin to understand the whole concept of being embedded in the matrix of life, that you are part of the great web, that there is energy flowing from you, there is energy flowing towards you. All these are beautiful concepts. All these are wonderful concepts. Everybody knows, understands. There are paintings, there are books. Until you experience yourself, it is all waste of time. Once you experience, you don't need to be told that. You are very, very clear about it. So that is the real reason. It is not trying to get control over people or trying to break their will. Okay, keep the people hungry. Because hungry people are suggestible. It is true. If you keep people tired and you keep people hungry, then they become very, very open to suggestion. So all cults pull that stunt. All cults pull that stunt. But the reason was not for cultic domination. The reason was to make people aware that there is another way to nourish yourself. Just because food is not available, your body is not going to break down, your mind is not going to break down. But what happens today is that when people fast, suddenly they become meditative. And they don't meditate upon the Ishta Devta, or they don't meditate, they meditate about Rasgulla, whatever, juicy steak, So at that moment, the mind, the consciousness is a full intensity. It is at that. So if you find that your fasting only makes you think about food, you are not ready to fast. Keep doing your kriya, keep doing your 8 spiritual breaths, keep doing your meditation. When automatically and spontaneously you stop, sometimes it will happen that without your knowing it, you haven't eaten the whole day. Then, okay, you have got somewhere. Eat only when you are really hungry, and don't, gorge. There is a ravenous hunger, that is what wolves do. Because wolves never know when they are going to get the next meal. So anytime they get to eat, they stuff themselves, very literally. Now, that's not a way for a human being to eat, It's okay for the wolf. Ravening, that's what it is called when you're ravenous hunger, like the hungry like the wolf, And some people, their face when they see that plate coming, you can see that. You can see they're actually swallowing saliva. You can see there's a little movement here, because the food has come in. That's not a good place to be in. If that plate of food can trigger a response like that in you, then you're not in a good place. You need to break that limitation. You need to break that dependence. And the fasting is done for that reason. Everything in yoga is to make you free. How many times will I say? Everything is to shatter the bounds of limitation. Everything is to push apart those things that keep you constricted. Now, of course, all processes, especially a powerful process like that, are prone to misuse. I am not concerned about that. I am saying this is why it is done. And if you understand it in that spirit, don't try it before you are ready, before your Prana Shakti has come to a certain level. Don't try it. You will fail miserably. Or like I say, now the Rasgulla god and the Pakoda god and the Samosa god will be the dominant Ishta Devta in your life. That's not needed. That's not needed. Yogis always, it's not like they don't appreciate, but there is a practice in many schools of yoga where they take all the food and they crunch it together and make it into a complete mishmash. where sweet things, sour things, hard things, soft things all mixed together until it's completely indistinguishable, and then they take it because they don't want that dependence on flavor, they don't want that dependence on taste, and they don't want that dependence on like and dislike. They just want, this is food that we need to take for the sake of bodily preservation, so let us break down all those. Otherwise, this is not, today the food was not good, or today the food was very tasty. Now, okay, there is no problem with that. So, foodies of course find it very difficult, because today it has become a mark of self-appointed, virtue, that I am a foodie, I am deeply, and I'm like, yeah, you're not a foodie, you're a person. But if you are in yoga and if you can feel that the Prana Shakti build up, then it becomes very easy. It becomes very, very easy for you to not eat, because then your strength and your life energy is not solely dependent on food. Your strength and your life energy is dependent on the ki, it is dependent on the prana. Now that you must get there. If you don't get there, if your predominant source of energy is not the Prana Shakti and is food, then you will fail as a yogi, or you will be extremely limited as a yogi. You have to get to the point where the predominant source of nourishment is Prana Shakti and not. And that is why the reason for fasting. And that is why the attitude towards food. The attitude towards food should not be a slavery attitude. It should not be that you are so wonderful, you are such a pleasure-giving heavenly experience. You are something needed so that I can become free. Now, if you understand that, it's very easy, and you won't begrudge fasting. And now everybody is going to start looking the Panchang. When is Ekadashi? That's fine. If at least you can do it that way, that would be fine. There is no problem. But I'm saying it is not compulsory that you have to do on Ekadashi. If you just start listening to your body, you will know when I should eat and when I should not eat. You will know that today I should not actually eat anything. I should just let it be. Now, I'm not saying that cut out all the chocolates and all the sweets. Eat. If you want to eat, you eat. But be aware of what you're consuming. If you can feel the vibrational quality of food, after that it's very, very easy to distinguish. And we have one of the affirmations, nothing that I eat or drink will abuse this temple of the living God, my body. Once you understand that, it's very easy. It's very, very simple. Once you get to the pranic level of things, once you get to the Prana Shakti level of anything, after that it's very easy. Will I allow this entry into my consciousness, into my system or not? That filter becomes automatic. Most people cannot, because the Prana Shakti is only not there to create a filter. Prana Shakti is not there to create a quality of judging whether this is a value or this is actually going to pull me down. So fasting is just it's just a process. It does not need to be made into a fetish in itself. It is a process that was designed in yoga to create greater Prana Shakti in you. And that is all it is. Now, those who can fast, of course, they have the tendency, then they tend to swell visibly, because now we are people who have broken the bondage of the body and the need and the desire of the. Now you have created a mental smugness within yourself, which is another matter. All right. And whether there's actually some kind of genuine Prana Shakti increase in the person or not, that of course becomes a matter. By their fruits you shall know them. It is not what they say, it is what happens actually, and what is the nature and the character. But this is the reason why. This is actually the reason why there is no great moral value to it, but there is immense actual physical transformative value to it. Don't do it as a moral thing, just do it as a sensible thing. So, be aware, and the goal is, where is the nourishment coming from? Is the nourishment coming from secondary and tertiary sources, food, or is it coming directly from primary source? Now this appears absurd, but all yogis know it's not absurd. That's the way it should be. That's the way it is. And they really don't have any time to prove it. They're like, you don't want to do it, okay. Those who can do it, we are not wasting time with you. They know where the nourishment comes from. They know where the actual source of nourishment comes from. Okay? Sarvam Shivamaya.